Okay, so on with the show. So, although I can't see, but how many of you feel that it's best to fly solo or as a co-founder, i.e. build a team? And ordinarily, if I could see it, I would tell you to put in thumbs up, sideways or thumbs down, whether you think building a team is more important. But since I can't see, hopefully you've thought about it. So just in general, do form a team, because look at just some of the roles that need to be played. It's the CEO, tech design, market research, operations, all of which, and as you're learning, if you're starting a startup right now, things do not progress linearly. You've got a lot of balls in the air that you're trying to move forward depending on what's going on. And at the moment, if you're doing it by yourself, they're all you. And just in general, investors prefer teams. You're going to need various expertise, some sort of the business side, some more the technical side, some in sales and marketing. And you'll just find with teams, I have found just the ones who are solo versus the ones that have more, that really your momentum is much better. You make more progress. So there's data that supports this, that 60% of the successful startups have 2 to 3 founders. They raise more money. They grow faster because, again, they have higher momentum. They just tend to be more successful, and they just have a better experience because you help to share the efforts, you talk through things, and as opposed to just talking to yourself. And so when one member is a little bit down, the other one can chat him or her up. So it is with the team, there are challenges there. So choose wisely. So I'm going to talk about who's part of your team. So co-founders are literally, and we'll talk the difference between a co-founder and an employee. But these are the ones who start the team. Well, I'm going to cover this all because they're all part of your team and you'll need to build them at various times, not necessarily right in the beginning. So founders' responsibilities are broad and deep. So you're responsible for the vision, the strategy, the raising the cash, and really driving the whole strategy and giving direction to the teams. So next to no market need, which justifies customer discovery, is you don't have the right team. So this is really important to get this right. So what you need to consider, obviously, is skills. Do they have networks, people they can reach out to help to advise the people with domain experts? Very important is also, do you share the same values and ethics? And it's a little harder to discern, but I've seen teams break up just because one wants to get rich quick, the other one wants to solve the world's problems. How well do you communicate together? And I'll talk about how you can discover this. And then this shared vision for what the company ought to be. So I will just say good founders disagree agreeably. And you want people who are not trying to be right, but trying to do right. And so I have seen teams, one was Black Locust, which had a very successful exit to Home Depot. And the 3 members would argue vociferously. In fact, they even did it when they were applying to get into an accelerator. I found out later. And I got the call about concern with the team. And I said, okay, did they argue a lot about the question you asked them? And all of a sudden they said, here's the answer. And they said, yeah. I said, so they do that all the time. They discuss out loud. They probably shouldn't have done it in front of you, and they go back and forth and they challenge each other. But at the end, then all their concerns are addressed and they came up to agreement. So disagreeing is not a bad thing. It's just how you resolve it. So this is just a question I get asked all the time, and I don't know if there is a good answer. Do friends make good partners? What I found is sometimes friends start out as good partners, but the friendship can fray. And can you be friends with your partners, and should you be? So I think more the thing is, you don't have to be besties, but you spend a lot more time with your partner in the startup as you go forward, as you do with your significant other, your spouse. So think about how much time you want to spend with somebody. So there's a concept called a founder's agreement that you should do something like this early on. Talk not just about the product or the services, but literally about how you will share responsibility for the company. And we have a template that you can use. There's a link that you can see that we got from the UPenn Law School, which has the different things that you need to cover. You don't have to agree on all this at once, but I would just suggest that you spend some time looking at how the company should be formed and what your agreements are before you get too far down the road. And if you don't want to actually do the founder's agreement, it's too soon, then you can put stuff in email. That's okay. Because I've seen it that people have avoided these questions, and all of a sudden, two of the founders thought that one of the founders thought the company should be 50-50. The other one thought it was closer to 60 or 70 versus 30 to 40, just because of the effort he had put in, and it ended up breaking up the company. Lawyers got involved. It was quite messy, and they were just on the ready to really get some traction. So you own the business. By the way, legally, I just found out that founders, the law does not distinguish between founders and employees. This is just something that we use that to describe the differences in responsibility. So you own the business, you make the big decisions, but early employees who are taking the risk of joining you at an earlier stage usually get larger options than later employees. So growing beyond the founder. So let's just suppose that you have found a founder, and so you now need help. So employee it's a legal thing that there are many laws that apply to it. And you can just look at the list that is there. And so what we suggest is you start anybody as a contractor. So they are not employees, and so everything on that legal list on the earlier slide does not apply. You still need an NDA, a non-compete assignment of IP. We have sample of these agreements written by lawyers, but we stripped out the company information that we can send you to get for contractors or anybody who is working on your company. So the way contractors work is they set up, you agree. We also have this agreement, by the way. This is the work that is to be performed. This is how the person is to be compensated. Here there's deliverables. And then what they do is they send you an invoice at an agreed upon period of time. And that what you do is you issue, in the US, it's called a 1099. And it is just literally a simple one-page piece of paper that you merely say, send to them, that they then use to file their tax returns, and a copy of the 1099 goes to the IRS. It is as simple as can be. You're not withholding Social Security or anything else. It is just simply a statement of earnings. So it avoids payroll and Social Security expense. And to be honest, if the contractor's not working out, it's much easier to fire them, either during the contract or at the end. You just simply don't renew it. So this can be a sinkhole for some. You heard a lot about interns or trainees, and the Department of Labor is very specific about it. And so when you say we're hiring interns, just be careful of that. There was a famous case that occurred a couple of years ago. It's called Runway, which was a New York company, and they had interns, unpaid interns, who literally were doing all the work of potentially of employees, and ended up in a huge lawsuit, and it's shown light on how people are using interns. So many times you can say, I'm going to hire an intern, or I'm going to get an intern to help me. I'm not going to pay them. But basically what you're doing, using it, is to get free labor. So this is the Department of Labor rules in there. So you derive no immediate advantage from their work. And in fact, it may be hindered by this, because you have to spend a lot of time training people or giving some added value. You can't use them to displace regular employees. And the experience has to be for the benefit of the intern, which is usually not that hard to do.
Do those same rules apply to nonprofit organizations, or are they different?
That's a good question. And it applies only for certain what we call volunteer types of work. So it is like doing community outreach and such. But if you're pulling somebody in to work at the nonprofit, the same rules do apply.
Okay.
We have a series called Start Smarts that we do with the University of Pittsburgh Law School. And we have a session that's coming up this spring. It's called Hiring and Firing. And they can be much more, the presenters can be much more precise on that. Okay. There was one that was done last year. We do the same things mostly every year. So it was last spring. And there is a workshop archives where we have the PowerPoint presentations, as well as I think the session was taped. And so you might be able to get the answer immediately, or else show up. I think it's in March. Okay. I can't look at my calendar. Okay, Pat.
Sounds great. Right. Thank you.
Okay.
So follow-on question to that. Since one of the requirements is that the work can't be immediately beneficial, does that mean that any early stage startup would basically be disqualified from using unpaid interns, right?
Well, disqualified is a different term. It's just one of those that the intern can sue you, or if the Department of Labor or something finds out at some point that you are abusing interns, they could take legal action.
Okay, so as long as there's an agreement of some kind of educational plan and learning objectives, then that, like, the risk is low in getting sued.
You know, Rowan, that's a great point. If you have some sort of how can we add benefit? So one of the things we tell people, the benefit of participating in a startup is, often you get what I call a seat at the table, and you get to learn a lot about how startups work. You learn about the business, you learn about the marketing, you get to important overall insight to all aspects of the company, as opposed to going to work for big. So having an educational plan. And I also tell you, often people take on these interns because what you're doing is you're test driving them. Are they somebody that we want to bring on next as a contractor and worth paying them? So it's a kind of a trial period. Even big companies do this, although they tend to pay their interns. That 60% of interns end up getting hired by the company. And it's their way of seeing how well you work and play with the rest of the team.
Right, makes sense. Thank you.
Okay. So all I can say is, before you make a hiring decision, get it right. There's an old saying, hire quickly, hire slowly, fire quickly, because bad employees can have a major effect on your relatively small company. So it's really important that you think about people who can change and grow with the company, because the needs will change. So let's just say right now what you need is an app. Once you get the app written, can that person play additional roles and grow into it? Or is just their only contribution is writing the app? So you want to avoid just for a singular one time. They're far better to do than as contractors. So there is a form, again, you will need a non-disclosure, and it's called an invention assignment. So whatever they create actually becomes, they will assign it to the company. They don't own what they create. Just like me as a CMU employee, if I use CMU vast resources to create a startup, and they're technically what I'm doing, this is what faculty are doing too. That CMU owns the right to the IP. So if it's an F1 visa, think carefully before you take on that expense. They're often the most interested in joining a startup, but for you as a company, you have to bear all the expenses of the application, and that's $1,500 a pop if you're applying for each year for an H-1B visa, which is it's a lottery. And then whatever expenses are necessary in order to onboard and finish the H-1B or whatever legal status you're going for. So many startups in particular do not take on those with an F1 visa in the beginning. Once they're further along, they have a little more money. We have office hours with the immigration attorneys, again, in that domain expert section of our website, that if you want to get more counseling on that or more information, you can just sign up for a time with them. Okay, so I'm going to skip through this pretty quickly in there. So directors, when you form a company, you need to have a board of directors. And what I suggest is at least 2 of you or a neutral. You want to retain control of the board as long as you can. And directors have a different level of responsibility than advisory. So the big thing is that, well, I'm going to get into this. Advisors are just simply people who help you move your business forward. And advisors can be getting great ones in there. They can make all sorts of introductions, but they have no fiduciary responsibility. So advisors do this. Just be careful if the first time you talk to somebody and they want to help you. If they ask for equity, I would be real careful that it's too soon. You almost have to test drive them as much as you have to test drive a future employee or a co-founder, just to find out if they really can execute and they really do help. So advisors, mentors, coaches, they're just there on an ad-need basis. They have no fiduciary responsibility toward you or the company. You're looking for diverse background. Advisory team, or somebody that you get together on a regular basis. So you'll find by talking with different people, either through customer discovery or going through our various programs, that there are some that you think you're reaching out to on a regular basis. And they may get equity, but I will just say, and I have a chart at the end, it's under 1% and it vests over time, just like employees. And again, they have no legal responsibility. So here's a technique I actually learned from one of my startups way time ago, is it's very time consuming to keep advisors informed and engaged. So what is best to come up with a periodic, it's more often in the beginning and maybe every other month later on, where you just do a real quick, what have we done? And it's an email update. You can ask the advisor if they would mind being put on it. You include your team with it, just 3 or 4 bullet points on what you've done. So it's not a newsletter. And you can also include an ask. You're looking for an introduction to, or you need help with whatever. So there's a trick to managing your advisors. And you can see in the earlier thing, I was talking about mentor whiplash. I have some of my teams that when they get into accelerators, they come back in and said, help, that we have one advisor's telling us we should be going left, another one saying we should be going right. And frankly, we think we should be going down the middle. And so what I find, do this, first of all, don't argue. That gives you a reputation for being uncoachable. But what is the technique that you can use is simply ask more questions about why of them. So you can say, well, I have somebody else telling me to go left. You're saying going right. Can you give me more information about why? And see how strongly felt it is, and based on what experience they're basing that recommendation on. And as you dig a little deeper, you find out whether how relevant it is. And it may be that one or the other is right, but just simply ask questions. And after the end, just say, you've been really helpful to give me a lot to think about. I really appreciate it. And then do what you think's best. It's your business. So you have no obligation to do what advisors are telling you to do. Your only obligation is to listen. Everybody's trying to help you. Okay, board of directors. This is a legal responsibility, and it's required by your articles of incorporation. And explicitly represent the interests of your shareholders. At the moment, when you have two co-founders or three, they're the only shareholders, but over time that will increase. And they actually can be held accountable if they are not doing what's best for the company. So do you need one? Yes, it's a legal requirement for incorporation, whether you're an LLC or whether you're a C Corp. But they're very good sometimes is because you, as I say, get in the weeds and they can pull you out and make you step back and think. And they are essential, they should be, for fundraising and business development. This is who you look for boards. So if they give you money, then most of them will want a board seat. But you can also have just plain old independence, and these could be people you work with who've been advising you, that you feel have a strong interest in helping the company go forward, and you can offer them a board seat. So I'm going to emphasize on this that they have to do what's best for the company and the shareholders. They are not there. Boards are not there their priority is not you. In fact, boards are responsible for hiring and firing the CEO. And just experience has shown and data has shown, for example, when a VC comes in and invests and gets a board seat, that within 6 months, there is a new CEO. That's not necessarily bad, because sometimes you've taken the company as far as you know how, and they want to bring in somebody's experience who knows how to get it to an exit. But on the other hand, just saying that the board is not there to be your friend. And service providers, accountants, attorneys, and bankers, they're not employees, and you don't want to put them on the board. And when you get around to hiring people, one of my CEOs, who is actually a CPA, he said he always outsources payroll. You just don't want to get into that. There are too many snares with collecting taxes and doing reporting and passing, sending the state money and so forth. And it's not that expensive, and it's just not something you want to spend your time on. And going beyond founders. So where do you find team members? My most frequently asked questions. So sometimes you can do it during your customer discovery interviews. These connect sessions, we have 3 a week until graduation, and every single one of them will start out with what we just did. And so maybe this session didn't work, but you'll have other connects, and you don't even have to say for the full connects. Allison's listening, but you can come in and do the connects and then just move on. So again, check the bulletin for events on campus as well. We do have one ad section in the bulletin. There are various events. we're going to be having a startup job fair in March 3rd that we're doing in conjunction with the University of Pittsburgh, as well as the Graduate Entrepreneurship Club. Stay tuned for information about that. CMU classes. The Tepper MBAs mastered this. They would find they needed some technical help. They would go find the professor that taught the course where that technology was being taught, and asked if they could show up in front of the class for 3 minutes or 5 minutes and just make a pitch. And they found team members that way. Handshake, we tell all our startups to post their positions on Handshake. And so Pitt also uses Handshake, so that broadens your outreach. Classmates and friends. There's some excellent help often come from other universities, doesn't have to be just CMU. And it comes down to network. It's it's not necessarily easy, but people have done it, and you've got to be persistent on that. So let's say you find some. So you're just talking with other students about joining your team, just in a general way. Do you need them to sign an NDA or a non-compete? And no, at this stage, it is not unnecessary. I think the movie on Facebook ruined or gave people a lot of the wrong impression. That stealing an idea, I have never seen it happen. And you need to learn to talk about your idea without giving away the secret sauce. You can say the problem you're solving and who you're solving it for, but you don't have to explain exactly how the algorithm works. And just in general, ability to execute in the idea is far more important than the idea itself. That old saying, 1% inspiration, 99% perspiration, that's exactly what it's all about. Startup in there. It's ideas are the fun, easy part, but making it work is the hard part. So you found a student or someone who's interested in your idea and willing to help. So what do you do next? So the old suggestion is date before you marry. I suggest you pick a project that needs to be done, something that is not too onerous, something that is relevant to the skill of the person that you're considering, and not so much that they feel like they're being used. So agree on the time frame, the deliverables, and then how did that work out? Did they do what they said they were going to do? Could they do what they said they were going to do? Did they follow up in an appropriate amount of time? Did they stay in touch? I would look for somebody who came back and said, you were kind of thinking about this, but I had some thoughts while I was doing this that may be more relevant. So you can see right away whether they're contributing or thinking through or buying in or leaning in to your venture. And what if they just say after a bit, they worked on this and they want to know they can be a co-founder. So what do you say to them? Date before you marry still applies. So just say co-founder status may be available for the right fit. Let's work together for a while. Take your time on this and see how they, again, looking for more things that they can do. If you did decide that this is the right person, but you wanted to be fair because they were doing a fair amount of work, as you know, equity vests over time, 3 or 4 years. And so, or the options. So whatever it is, I always suggest you look at backdating it that actually started at the time when they started doing that second round, where you've already done the initial due diligence and thinking they're a category. So that makes them feel better, and it's a little bit more fair if they actually do come on board. So just say if you get a co-founder, equity does not have to be equally divided. In fact, often it shouldn't be. And so there's a connects on Founders Pie, but it's also on the workshop archives. There's also a section under entrepreneurship resources. It's Frank Demler who teaches this, and it's a tool to help you figure out how much equity your co-founder should have. And what I have found, interesting enough, that going through that exercise of having a rational discussion, there are a couple teams that have never survived even coming up with the equity agreement. So in many ways, that's one of the easiest decisions you'll ever make. And if you can't get through that, then it's not going to work. This is important to have that discussion earlier versus later. And be careful about giving equity to, I said, one-timers or short-timers. And the biggest, the most frequent caution that I give are those who need somebody to write an app or do a website or something like that. But once they do that, that's going to be it. All you have tends to be is equity. You have, if you don't have cash, and there's some other choices which I'll talk about. But you feel like you have a lot of equity in the beginning, and so you feel like you can dole it out, and it is that's not the way to look at it. So here's the question: if I don't have equity, what do I have, or cash? So there is equity. Sometimes you can defer the cash, and you can just say that after my first round of significant funding, decide on what the dollar amount is. Like you get into an accelerator for $25,000 or $50,000, I will give you a check for $500. But it's conditional upon you getting the funding, but at least you can get something. We have found between experience and references, there are teams. Excuse me, I've got this cold. If you haven't heard, I'm going to take a sip. That sometimes the student just wants a reference for their resume. And having said that they worked or they provided value to a startup can be a good thing to have on their credentials. And so just say, I will write you a letter telling about the experience that you brought to the team. I will put you on our website as one of the contributors, not necessarily as a founder or the full-time team. Sometimes you can actually, some programs allow them to get academic credit for the work that they're doing. They can sign up for a specific program. So other alternatives. So this is anybody you bring onto the team, regardless of what the role that they're playing. Do you need them to sign anything? Yes. IP assignment, whatever they produce while they're working on your project is owned by you. And if you haven't formed a company yet, it can be transferred into the company. And again, I have the draft document for this that you can get them to sign. 2 pages, it's literally written by a lawyer, and you just fill in the blank. Non-disclosure, you can't tell others what you're doing. And non-compete is they can't take what they've learned and set up and work on their own business. So if you're here on an F1 visa, you may be able to apply for curricular practical training. It is not as obvious, or fewer curriculum than you think allow for this curricular practical training. This is what you take while you're still a current student, or you can apply for optional practical training after graduation. The thing I would tell you is go see the Office of International Education and learn specifically what you can and cannot do, and what, particularly in view of your program. If you're going to go for OPT and you're getting close to graduation, realize it takes time to do that. There are various forms of it, but there are other. We just had a whole session on immigration or visa statuses. Everybody thinks H-1B, but it's there are other options that are available to you. If you do use an F1 student, either as a paid type of position or intern, generally F1 students cannot be paid. That's in violation of their visa. The exception is a few curriculums require that they get an internship as part of their program. And if that's the case, then they can be paid. So we just had the starting the business on an F1 visa last week. And PowerPoint presentation is available. Plus we had a special session this summer about a program called Parole, which is very friendly to, very friendly to immigrants. And then the upcoming session on hiring and firing, of which I don't have the date. So that is kind of what I got. Just so you know, at the end of this presentation, I referred to it. This is advisor compensation that came from the Founders Institute. And to give you an idea how, I would say little in a relatively that advisors get. And plus they also do vest. It seems like for 20.25%, 1/4%, why should I vest over 3 or 4 years? Well, advisors, if they don't do what they're supposed to be doing, they shouldn't have equity. That funders will just say, why is all this equity given to people who are not contributing to the success of the company? So then you have to fix that or get it back. Anyway, so I'm opening it back to Q&A.